Good morning. I'm Savannah Sellers. Joe is on assignment this morning, so you're just with me. We start this Thursday morning in South Florida, where at least 5 counties are under state of emergency orders, including the city of Miami, after severe storms dumped more than a foot of rain in some areas. The downpour triggered rare flash flood warnings. And as you can see in this video right here, several roads were turned into rivers. Officials in Sarasota are calling it a once-in-a-thousand-year rain event. The storm system also spawned an E1 tornado in Hobe Sound in Martin County, about 35 miles north of West Palm Beach. A driver caught this video of debris flying through the air. Thousands are still without power. NBC News meteorologist Angie Lassman is, of course, here with us on this important day with the forecast. We also have the chief of Broward County Fire Rescue, Michael Kane. He's standing by. First, though, let's go to NBC News correspondent Sam Brock. He is on the ground just north of Miami.
Savannah, good morning. Right now, there's a brief break in the rain. This is not going to last. This morning, there are 5 counties under a state of emergency that includes Miami-Dade and Broward. That's collectively about 4.5 million people. We're here in Aventura this morning, and right now there's still a bunch of water that's in the streets. This is actually, if you can believe it, receded incredibly from the several feet of water that we were seeing just yesterday. Cars absolutely littering streets for blocks and blocks. We're watching as tow trucks are coming through right now to try to get them up. All of these folks were stranded out here yesterday as we see a record level of rainfall over the course of this week.
All right, Sam Brock, thank you very much. Stay safe. Let's now bring in Chief Michael B. Kane. He is the battalion chief of Broward Sheriff Fire Rescue and Emergency Services Department. Chief Kane, good morning. Thank you very much for joining us on what I'm sure is a busy and tough morning. We know you have been on the ground assessing. It looks like you're outdoors right now. What are you seeing?
Good morning, Savannah. So last night, yesterday and going into last night was extremely busy. We ran dozens and dozens of calls. The assessment you made just before I went on air was very, very accurate. We saw vehicles stranded. We performed numerous rescues for people stranded inside their vehicles, people who required medical aid. We ran approximately 60 calls for service directly related to the storms between the hours of about 2 p.m. until about 8 o'clock yesterday evening. So it's been quite the busy shift for us.
I'm sure. I mean, Florida is no stranger, right, to a storm of this caliber. You guys deal with hurricane season every year, but now it's the thick of tourist season. What's your biggest concern right now?
Well, our biggest concern is safety of our residents, really. You know, you can't stress safety enough. And as you mentioned, it is tourist season. It is summer break. We are seeing an influx of people, and people that may not be used to the deluge that we experienced yesterday. In fact, this is very reminiscent of a storm that we had back in April of last year, where we had several days of torrential downpours, and which left the streets virtually impassable for days at a time. So it was very reminiscent of that, just on a smaller scale. However, I will say, though, that we are very prepared. We train for events like this. We have the equipment, we have the personnel at the ready, and should we encounter another evening like we did last night, we'll be out there, I can assure you, and we'll be ready.
Given those safety concerns, what is your department telling people in the area to do in order to stay safe? And what helps you respond to this emergency if people in your county do what for you?
So the number one thing for the general public is when we have a storm event such as last night, it's to stay indoors. Don't travel unless it's absolutely necessary, emergent. Travel, and that's pretty much it. Allow the fire rescue units and the emergency workers to be able to respond to the calls for service unimpeded, because with the vast number of vehicles that are on the roads, they tend to get stranded in the high waters, which makes the roadways unpassable for us. And we have to navigate around those vehicles, which extends our response times. So really, it's for the residents to stay indoors. Now, This morning, as I was driving around doing an assessment of our area, I did notice some people walking around, kind of surveying their neighborhoods. And one thing that's really concerning is when you have standing water, because you could have power lines down. That water could be electrified. Should you step into the water, you could become electrocuted. And also standing water around large lakes and ponds. You may be in 2 feet of water one moment, and in the next moment you could be in 6 feet of water, and the water could be over your head. So those are the types of things that we're encouraging or urging our residents to heed.
Such important safety reminders. What is the power situation like in your county? How many people don't have power? How long could it take to come back?
There's sporadic power outages throughout the county. I really don't know when the power will be back on. Florida Power and Light, I'm sure, has their workers working very diligently to get that power turned back on. What I can tell you is in the area in which I am now, Hallandale Beach, which was really ground zero yesterday of this event in Broward County. The power is on. I don't know of any residents in the city here that are without power. So we're very fortunate right now. The traffic lights are on and working. The roads, the water in the roadways has receded quite a bit. Coming into work this morning, the roads were very drivable in this general area. However, there are spots where there is still standing water, and roads are unpassable in some areas.
Chief Michael Cain, we really appreciate you taking time on a busy morning for us. Thank you very much. Stay safe. We appreciate it.
You're welcome, Savannah. Have a good day. Thank you.
For more on the flood watch in Florida, let's get a closer look at your Morning News Now weather. Angie Lastman is with us with the latest. Angie, is there relief in sight?
Yeah, unfortunately, Savannah, good morning to you, but we don't really see a whole lot of relief in the way of long-term kind of a situation for folks across this region. Yes, we've had a couple of breaks in the rain, especially overnight for much of this region, but we're going to turn that faucet back on here as the day goes on. So no surprise that we've got flood watches still up for 7 million people. Yesterday, picking up anywhere from 10 to 15 inches of rain in some of these spots, Broward County, Miami-Dade County, really impressive rainfall. And by the way, we've got Florida sitting on porous limestone, so that means we're also dealing with water coming from the ground up. So we've got the really heavy rainfall rates, impressive rainfall rates happening over long periods of time. No surprise if we see kind of a repeat performance through the day today with any additional rain that does fall. You can see the stationary front still hanging out a little farther north of Tampa, but either way, we're going to keep it unsettled, and the significant rainfall is in the picture for today and potentially tomorrow too. You can see here Friday looks like we'll have a little less rain, but again, any additional even inch or less is going to be problematic for some of these areas that picked up a foot of rain in just one day. So this is something that we'll watch at least through the end of our work week. Here's the latest as far as the expected amounts that we could potentially see. I think we're looking at anywhere from another 5 to 10 inches of rain, and this goes through Saturday. So not just today, but tomorrow too. But of course, we could see some of those thunderstorms that really get going. They don't have a lot of movement happening, and that means that we're dumping heavy amounts of rain on one single spot, and that's how we start to see that flooding happen. Of course, this is something that we'll watch through the end of the week. We're also going to keep a close eye on this little area right here. It doesn't look like we're going to see much development in the short term, but we could see some gradual development here as it emerges off the coast of Florida and out into portions of the Atlantic, moving away from the state. But I do want to call your attention to one other area that we're going to watch likely developing in the Bay of Campeche. That's where we're going to watch for basically the potential of a system to happen here as we get into early next week. So potentially developing on Sunday into a disturbance, moving through parts of the Gulf of Mexico, which, by the way, are quite warm at this time of year. We've got a whole lot of moisture that's going to push into parts of the Gulf Coast, specifically, I think, Texas, Louisiana is where we'll be watching as we get into next week for some locally heavy rainfall and, you guessed it, some flooding as this develops. Now, could we be talking about a tropical depression? Maybe. Either way, it looks like we're going to see some really unsettled weather for folks there. And we don't see a whole lot of dry skies in the forecast really for our friends in Florida either. We'll still be watching for those showers, like I mentioned on Friday. In that region, we'll see some thunderstorms across parts of the Northeast, Savannah, and those record highs, of course, something else that we're having to watch for with triple-digit temperatures across a good chunk of the country for the weekend.
Lots of extreme weather, thinking of those people in Florida. Angie, thank you so much. Well, President Biden is in Italy this morning for the start start of the G7 summit. He arrived last night ahead of the three-day meeting of the world's largest industrialized nations. The conflict between Ukraine and Russia is expected to take center stage at the summit. This trip comes just days after his son, Hunter Biden, was convicted on federal gun charges, and also 2 weeks before the much-anticipated debate with his rival, former President Donald Trump. NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba is traveling with the president. She joins us from Italy. Monica, good morning. So President Biden is set to meet later today with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. What can we expect there? And tell us what else the president has done so far today.
Yeah, certainly, Savannah, Ukraine on the top of the list for these world leaders to be discussing. And specifically, President Biden is going to be announcing a new joint security agreement between the U.S. and Ukraine that is supposed to last for 10 years and is supposed to be a pledge of defense cooperation. And in the words of the National Security Advisor, a real signal of resolve that is meant and aimed toward Russia and its continued aggression against Ukraine. They're also going to be discussing, these leaders, as they have been meeting already today and will continue to throughout the day, how they can potentially come up with this plan to use frozen Russian assets to continue to fund Ukraine's defense and provide more military aid. So they're trying to really iron out the details of how to do that exactly. But we'll hear more from President Biden and from President Zelensky when they appear in a joint news conference a couple of hours from now. Savannah.
Monica, so just that a second ago, this comes just 2 days after the president's son was found guilty in that federal gun case. Explain to us the tone the president and first lady are trying to set by moving forward after the conviction, especially when he's immediately on the global stage at an event like this.
Yeah, and we saw that he did shift his schedule on Tuesday after that verdict came in where Hunter Biden was found guilty on those 3 felony gun charges. And the president decided he wanted to go to Wilmington to briefly see his son and be with his family for some time before leaving for Italy yesterday to come to this summit. And I'm told that there were no discussions about changing this part of his schedule and the week that the president wanted to be here for all of these critical meetings. But certainly those around him concede that this has taken a real emotional toll on the president, on the first lady. But you're going to be seeing both of them incredibly busy over the next couple of days. The first lady has a very robust schedule over today, tomorrow, and Friday, where she'll be traveling to various states. And then, of course, the president is rounding out this time in Italy over the next few days after having just been in France, in Normandy, in Paris last week. So it has been a really jam-packed June where they're trying to focus on these official engagements, but certainly looming over all of it is the pain that this family is trying to navigate here. And it's one that for many years they have struggled with, and something that the president even alluded to in his statement after Hunter Biden's conviction, which is that he really does approach this as a concerned parent and a dad who loves his son and who's proud of his son.
And Monica, if we look ahead to that first presidential debate in Atlanta just 2 weeks from today, how do we see the conviction playing in there?
And it's something that those close to the president and his aides have been aware of would likely come around the same time. So they have certainly been factoring that into how they may approach this. But the president, because of everything we just discussed, hasn't really had that much time for debate prep. When he gets back from this trip to Italy, he actually heads straight to Los Angeles, where he has a major fundraiser with former President Obama, with George Clooney and Julia Roberts. So he's going to be a little bit focused on that this coming weekend. And then when he heads back to D.C., he has about a 10-day stretch where he is going to be hunkered down in some extensive debate prep where they will be dealing with some of this. And I think you can expect the president to simply say that he is a father who loves his son. And then certainly, of course, there is the split screen of former President Trump, who he will be facing, who was recently convicted on those 34 counts in that hush money trial. Savannah.
Right. Monica Alba, thank you very much. Safe travels. Well, this morning, frustration is growing as ceasefire negotiations between Israel and Hamas are at a standstill, with the U.S. saying that some of the demands Hamas is making are unworkable.
Hamas could have answered with a single word: yes. Instead, Hamas waited nearly 2 weeks and then proposed more changes, a number of which go beyond positions that it previously taken and accepted.
Blinken says that mediators would keep trying to close a deal with the help of Qatar. Meanwhile, here in the U.S., frustration over the violence is growing, with pro-Palestinian demonstrators taking over part of a building at Cal State University, Los Angeles. That protest prompted the school to order students to shelter in place. NBC News international correspondent Raf Sanchez joins us with the latest from Tel Aviv. Raf, good morning. Let's start with the latest on ceasefire negotiations. We just heard there Secretary Blinken accuse Hamas of making unacceptable demands, of not simply saying yes, as he said. What else are we hearing from the secretary, and how much wiggle room is there when it comes to reaching this deal?
Savannah, good morning. We saw a frustrated but determined Secretary of State Antony Blinken speaking in Qatar yesterday. Frustrated because he said that this ceasefire proposal was presented to Hamas in late May, that it was ready to go, that if they said yes, a ceasefire could be in place by now. And instead, they waited 2 weeks and sent back a whole series of changes. As you mentioned, the Secretary describing some of those changes as potentially reasonable. They could be talked through with the Israelis. He is saying that some of them are non-starters. He is saying, though, that the United States, Qatar, and Egypt, the so-called mediators in these talks, are determined to keep trying to bridge the gaps, that they will be going back and forth between Israel and Hamas in the coming days, trying to see if those new Hamas demands can be satisfied and if some of them can be pushed back to try to get this to something that is also acceptable to the Israelis. Now, Blinken did not go into detail about what those changes were that Hamas is seeking, but a source familiar with the talks tells NBC News that Hamas is looking for a firm timeline for when Israeli forces will withdraw from Gaza, and it is not at all clear that that is a commitment that Israel is prepared to make. Remember, centrist members of the Israeli government resigned from the war cabinet last week. So it is now Netanyahu and his far-right allies who are making up the bulk of the Israeli government. Those far-right ministers are deeply opposed to this ceasefire deal. So it is not clear at this stage if these are gaps that can be bridged. Savannah.
Raf, I do want to ask about the potential here. I know we've been focusing a lot on these ceasefire negotiations, but just other things that are going on that kind of stoke that concern again about this broadening rather than coming to an end. Yesterday, Iranian-backed Hezbollah fired over 200 rockets at Israel. That was following an Israeli strike that killed a Hezbollah commander. I know you were actually there when some of those rockets were fired and then intercepted. Talk us through that experience and also where we are at with the concern that this could widen, this war could take up more of the region.
Yeah, Savannah, so this was one of the biggest Hezbollah rocket barrages that we have seen in these 8 months of war. All day yesterday, the skies over northern Israel filled with smoke. You had sirens going off. You had people running to bomb shelters. Some of these Hezbollah rockets fell in open areas. They started big fires, and our team was in one of those fields. We were looking at some of that fire damage when we heard interceptions nearby, and I want to just show you what that moment was like.
We're seeing more interceptions now over the skies of northern Israel as a fresh barrage of Hezbollah rockets comes in.
So you can hear just the enormous roar of those interceptor missiles streaking overhead to bring those Hezbollah rockets down. There were no casualties reported in northern Israel as a result of those rocket barrages. But the fear here is that a full-scale war between Israel and Hezbollah has the potential to be devastating. Savannah.
All right, Raf Sanchez, thank you very much. Well, as we have continued to report, the war in Gaza is stoking tensions here in the U.S. A series of recent anti-Semitic incidents here in New York City has leaders sounding the alarm. Red paint was splashed on the home of a Jewish museum director. And pro-Palestinian groups have been slammed for protesting outside an art exhibit honoring the lives lost on October 7th. NBC News correspondent Valerie Castro has more.
Pro-Palestinian protesters making their mark in red paint.
Oh my goodness!
On the home of the Brooklyn Museum's Jewish director. The latest incident in escalating tensions over the Israel-Hamas war playing out in New York City.
I think it's terrible. I don't think it's an effective way to deal with a problem.
The vandalism condemned by New York Governor Kathy Hochul, calling it an abhorrent act of anti-Semitism.
Free Palestine!
In recent weeks, protesters taking to the subways, defacing train cars, and seemingly trying to intimidate riders. In Manhattan, a pro-Palestinian crowd gathered outside the Nova Music Festival exhibition, a display recalling the deadly terror attack on Israel and those who were killed or taken hostage on October 7th. Organizers of the protest had called for a day of rage in response to Israel's raid on the Nuseirat refugee camp, during which 4 Israeli hostages were freed and 274 Palestinians were killed.
Protesters waved Hezbollah and Hamas flags. At other protests, they carried banners reading, "Long live October 7th." And one person even yelled, he wishes, a quote, Hitler was still here. These are reprehensible and vile comments.
New York Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez describing the protest as atrocious anti-Semitism, but the group claiming responsibility for the demonstration within our lifetime, saying it reiterates the call for sustained action against any institution facilitating or justifying the genocide of the Palestinian people, including the Nova exhibition. The city continuing to make arrests while trying to quell any violence.
Since October 8th, the NYPD has made more than 2,850 arrests at Israeli Gaza protests alone.
Our thanks to Valerie Castro for that report. In an effort to keep Jewish citizens safe, the NYPD is now stepping up patrols at events and synagogues around the city. Let's turn now to Capitol Hill, where the Republican-controlled House has voted to hold Attorney General Merrick Garland in contempt of Congress. This escalation of the fight between Garland and the GOP comes after the AG refused the Republican demand that he hand over audio of President Biden's interview by the special counsel investigating his handling of classified documents. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitale joins us with the latest. Ali, good morning. So the vote was close, 216 to 207. One Republican joined Democrats in voting no. Tell us more about the numbers here, about this vote, what happened, but also remind us the details of the issue at hand. Why won't he turn those tapes over?
A very close vote yesterday, Savannah, and one Republican voting against his party with Democrats not to hold the Attorney General in contempt. His explanation for this, an interesting one. He says he's a former prosecutor himself, and he said, I cannot in good conscience support a resolution that would further politicize our judicial system to score political points. He went on to say the American people expect Congress to work for them and prioritize good governance, calling this enough is enough. The House Speaker, for his part, told us last night in the immediate minutes after the vote that this was an example of the House doing its job. And at the heart of this matter here, Savannah, is the congressional committees who want the Attorney General to turn over an audio recording of an interview that President Biden did with special counsel Robert Hur. That was over his handling of classified documents. You'll remember Hur decided not to press charges. In this case, the House committees already have the transcripts. What they're trying to get is the audio. The White House and the DOJ have both said they're exerting executive privilege over the audio piece of that.
Ali, this vote now makes Merrick Garland just the third Attorney General to be held in contempt of Congress, joining Bill Barr, joining Eric Holder. President Biden and his administration invoked executive privilege, as you just said, in refusing to hand this over. So ultimately, and when you mentioned that the one Republican who did join Democrats was a prosecutor, is it unlikely that he will be prosecuted? Is this more symbolic of an effort? What do we think about that? And then also tell us the response here from the Attorney General.
This is a political message, at least from House Republicans. One of the chairmen who's at the center of the requests for the audio, Congressman Jim Jordan, told us yesterday he thinks that this could end up in court, maybe, but we do not expect the Department of Justice to begin pursuing anything around this, in part because we saw the Attorney General on Capitol Hill in recent days. He said he respects the idea of contempt, but he won't be intimidated. You see him then echoing those sentiments in the immediate aftermath of this vote, saying in a statement that I'll read to you, interview, calling it deeply disappointing, in their words, that the House of Representatives has turned a serious congressional authority into a partisan weapon. They say that today's vote, which was last night, disregards the constitutional separation of powers, the Justice Department's need to protect its investigations, and the substantial amount of information we have provided to the committees. Again, we should underscore the audio that they want is already in transcript form, and the special counsel has already testified before Congress on these matters.
Allie, before I let you go, I do want to ask you about something that happened yesterday. Several people arrested at the Congressional baseball game for charity. This is after protesters stormed the field. It's an annual event. It is well attended by members of Congress. What happened here?
Annual event, we always see the members take to the field, Republicans playing Democrats at Nats Park. What we also usually see here, though, are protesters who try to make a moment of it at the Congressional baseball game, having the attention of all of those lawmakers. Certainly yesterday was no exception, as you see some of the signs that were there about fossil fuels, all of these climate related. In part, they were protesting some of the sponsors of the events, but also taking to the field, running through, Capitol Police having to arrest several protesters, pausing the game, at least before Republicans could continue trouncing the Democrats. I'm sure we'll hear about that from lawmakers today.
I'm sure you'll let us know. Allie Vitale, thank you so much.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.